Welcome to Selling Secrets, the show about action movies and spy films. Our mission is to look at the movies we love and go behind the scenes to find out what makes a successful Hollywood blockbuster. From interviews to movie reviews, marketing campaign analysis, and more, Selling Secrets is your home of spy films and action movies. Do you know what it takes to make a Hollywood blockbuster successful? Let's find out together on Selling Secrets. Hello and welcome to Selling Secrets. I'm your host, Josh Gay. Today is a very special episode. Joining me for an interview is YouTuber and animation professional Calvin Dyson. Arguably one of the biggest James Bond YouTubers in the world. I'm honored to have Calvin on Selling Secrets. We had a fantastic conversation where we talked about all things from his work in the animation and film industry, his journey as a creator on YouTube, as well as his experience within the James Bond community. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did recording it with Calvin, so let's just dive right in. Without further ado, here's my interview with Calvin Dyson. Welcome to Selling Secrets. I'm your host, Josh Gay, and today I have a very special guest with me. He's a man that to the James Bond community needs no introduction. He's a YouTube creator. He's a creator in the film industry itself as well. I'd love to introduce to the podcast Calvin Dyson. Calvin, thank you for coming on.
Hello, thank you very much for having me on, and thanks very much for getting up so early because we're recording this evening time UK, but morning time Melbourne time. So it's
it's 20 to 8 in the morning, so it's not that bad now. I'd be on my way to work.
One of us is having coffee, the other one is having like alcohol. that's the main difference here.
The bane of my existence whenever I jump on someone's live stream from the other side of the world. Everyone's, cracking out the happy hour, and here I am with my latte or my espresso. So the things we do for our country. Calvin, obviously you need no introduction as a creator. The Bond community, everyone knows who you are. You're prolific on YouTube. But for those who don't know you, can you tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Calvin, and I guess in the Bond community, I'm probably best known for having a YouTube channel, which I've been running for, about 11 years now, which just goes to show that just stick at anything, folks, and eventually it'll get somewhere, maybe. But yeah, so that's sort of, I've been making Bond review videos, just conversational sort of stuff. It's very much kind of like my soapbox, my internet soapbox for just talking about all of my Bondian opinions. Otherwise, I live and work in London in the UK, and I have done for a good little while now. How deep do you want to go?
Well, what do you do for a living? I know you work as an animator. Very, very exciting sort of industry to be in.
Oh, it's great. No, I'm very, very lucky to work in the industry that I'm in. I studied animation. At the moment, I'm not technically an animator myself, so I'm not animating, but I'm more on the kind of managerial, executive side of things. So kind of working over a variety of animated TV shows and kind of working with the studios who we're working with on that and working with the writers, directors to sort of make shows as best as they can be, really, which is a fun job. It's, my job is reading scripts and watching animatics and rough animation and that kind of stuff and honing fart gags for a living. So it could be worse.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Well, what inspired you to get into the industry and get into animation?
Oh, well, I've always loved, ever since sort of, borrowing my dad's camera and making like little stop motion videos out of my like Star Wars figures and that kind of thing. So it was always like a thing that I did in childhood, and I was always fascinated with like, old animated films. And when I remember like being like 5 years old, deciding that I was going to make Snow White 2. And because I just discovered like how cartoons were made by people drawing, I didn't quite grasp the concept of there being like cells. So the background is separate from the character, and that's how they animate. So I just set about drawing everything on like A4 pieces of paper. I must have got about like 6 frames in before I was like, you know what, Dopey doesn't need to come out of the house. This is good enough.
That's hilarious.
And honestly, it was just kind of being a fan, and I'm a big film geek anyway. And then going to university, doing a filmmaking course, and then got an internship out of university, and sort of went from there, really. Obviously, there's been periods of, struggling and the dreaded unpaid internships and, awful office assistant jobs, that kind of thing. But I've been very lucky career-wise, very, very lucky indeed.
Definitely. Well, I likewise, I studied film at university, a 3-year degree. And what I noticed coming out of uni, a lot of people don't end up working in the industry. Have you got any advice for someone who may be studying at the minute or looking at getting into the industry? So obviously, you've been very successful in what you're doing now. Can you tell us a little bit about, your journey and what you'd, what bit of advice you'd give to someone who's aspiring to get into the line of work?
That's a really good question, and you might differ from me actually on this. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what your sort of advice would be to people sort of doing that, because nothing is going to make your parents sort of cry into their cornflakes more than announcing first thing in the morning that you're going to do an art degree or a film degree. Anything like that is just going to strike terror into them. But if you go into it with a really good open attitude and kind of being open to a lot of things, I think that's good. Because I think like I knew a few people who dropped out in my course really early on because they already thought they knew everything, and they already thought they were Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez and all that kind of stuff. And it's, you just kind of need to be open to learning new things. And even if you think you know it, maybe it wouldn't hurt to go over it again. But I think a lot of people go into film school thinking they're going to come out and they're going to be, the next Christopher Nolan or whatever. But there are actually so many more jobs. Like, I didn't know that the job that I did really existed when I was at film school, and I'm making TV shows. It's different, but I know a few people from my course who've ended up in a variety of different roles that aren't necessarily director of A-list movie or whatever, which I think is what a lot of people aspire to when they go to film school. But you can still sort of have a very fulfilling and creative career, even if it's not, because it's a 1 in a billion, obviously, that you're a Christopher Nolan or a Quentin Tarantino or anything like that, and the opportunities that allow for that. I guess that would be my main advice.
Well, to answer your question, and you saying, my journey may differ. I was fortunate in the fact that my parents were very open to the idea of me going into film school, because my dad is a videographer and a photographer, and he's a creative. So I'm not sure if you listened to the episode where I interviewed him, but it was basically, yep, dad does this. I love what dad does, and I want to do exactly what he does. So it was a natural progression of the family just going, yeah, go for it, go nuts, absolutely. But I totally agree with you. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I haven't listened to that one yet, but I'm going to put it on my list for my walk tomorrow now, because that sounds great. That's really awesome that they were so supportive of it. That's
definitely. But I agree with the university side of things, and I was probably a little bit guilty of that, sort of going, I'm going to be a director. I want to be a director or a cinematographer, and that's it. That's my career path. And the stark reality of coming out of uni is, the most successful people in that course, they're now not even working in the industry. And Australia, the UK and the US are vastly different markets. And the one bit of advice I'd say to people in Australia, at least, is get the fuck out of Australia. It's such a small market. I mean, there are jobs, don't get me wrong. And, I worked mainly freelance is the way you'll find it in Australia. There's not really, in the film TV space, there's not necessarily that stability of work here. It's very muchly freelance. So, I worked everything from corporate videography all the way through to, being a drone tech on some pretty high level TVC and TV work. My main bit of advice, though, is don't push yourself too hard. because on the camera side of things or the crewing side of things, it's obviously a little bit different to animation, but I unfortunately, severely injured my back. And, working at unpaid gigs or non-union gigs, you're not covered. And no job is worth crippling yourself over. So as much as you're passionate and as much as you think, this is going to get me somewhere, it's not worth crippling yourself over.
That's very true, actually. And I think here anyway, the kind of unpaid internships, that kind of, we'll pay you with experience that you get when you do the job, that kind of thing, I think it's phasing out or almost completely phased out here, which is really good. Is it similar in Australia, or is there still a lot of that kind of thing going around?
No, because we don't really have any major production houses here outside of Fox in Sydney, or that's really the only, or the networks. We don't really have those ones where you go, yep, I'm going to go into a company. If you're wanting to work on set in the majority of the productions here in Australia, you have to be with an agency called Freelancers, and it's a bit of an old boys club. And if you're not in that, you're really toiling in the creative side of things. At least if you're wanting to work short film or long form content that isn't commercial, it's very much the unpaid passion projects. So, which is fun. Don't get me wrong. It's incredible to work with passionate people on sets and make some really cool stuff. But you're going to be living off ramen noodles for a little while. Well, talking about production houses and animation and your career, is there anyone in particular that you would want to work on, or a project in the future that you'd go, that is just something or someone that I'd want to work with, that's at the peak of their game, that you'd want to work alongside, whether it be a director or whoever it is in the industry?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, I think on a property level, Totally Spies was something that I loved when I was a kid, and I saw that that's coming back now.
Oh, really?
They've announced there's going to be like a new version of it. I'm not sure if it's a full-on reboot or a follow-up or what, but that's something that I would love to. I mean, obviously this is lame and obvious because I'm a big Bond fan, but working on anything kind of spy sort of related would be really fun, because a lot of what I work on is kids stuff. And obviously Totally Spies is kids as well, but it's it's always kind of exciting to work on some action sort of spy sort of stuff. So I guess that's it really. I'm very lucky that I get to work with an awful lot of really talented, cool people anyway. So I feel very fulfilled in that sense, other than I would love to work on that spy series. Like Totally Spies or just another original one, something like that I would really like.
Is there anyone like, say, Brad Bird, or anyone who you would you'd aspire to work alongside or learn from?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've always really liked Aardman. Nick Park and a lot of the stuff that they produce, and that's very much my sensibility as well. Like certainly when I was at film school, like I wasn't aspiring to be the Quentin Tarantino. I was aspiring to be the Nick Park, to be honest. The Wallace and Gromit kind of thing. So that would be probably something of a dream.
I saw they're coming out with a new project soon. I think it might be Netflix. They've signed a deal to do quite a number of things. So you never know.
And the Chicken Run sequel is one of those. I think I'm excited about that.
Oh no way. That'd be so cool. I don't know how they'd do a sequel to that, but I'm down. I love that movie.
I'm kind of fascinated, but we'll see.
Absolutely. Well, look, moving on from your career as an animator, this show is primarily about spy films and action films. And I've followed you since early days when you were starting YouTube. I think you started in 2011, I believe it was. I probably started following you when I was in university, so 2012, 2013. Your channel focuses on James Bond, so naturally we're going to get into James Bond, right? What made you start creating James Bond specific content for YouTube?
Oh, well, this is kind of a result of being quite bored and having a lot of time on my hands as a student and access to editing software. So that was a big drive for it. But also that at the time I was really getting into a lot of like online content creator sort of stuff. Like I've talked about the Nostalgia Critic before, I think, on my channel, and being very much influenced by like Lindsay Ellis, that whole Channel Awesome crowd I really loved at that time. And I think that I was also wanting, it was like a summer or coming out of summer, and I wanted to revisit all of the Bond films and kind of like, well, what am I going to do differently this time? I was thinking, should I just write a blog about it, or what could I, and then just like, oh, well, why not make videos? And maybe one day you'll be invited on Channel Awesome or something like that. So it just came out of that, really. And then it's just become a hobby now, because it's just something that I do as a pastime, like editing and that kind of thing. And I suppose that's linked in a way to working in animation as well, because it's something that takes a long time and it takes a lot of effort to get something quite small out of it at the end, really. But it's just a hobby now. So I just, yeah.
I love it. That's phenomenal. And for your production values are so high, so you're clearly passionate about what you're making and wanting to put out there. My question is, why James Bond specifically? Like, what is it about the series that has captivated your enthusiasm for, the better part of the last decade and moving forward?
Well, at the time when I was starting up the channel, it was either going to be James Bond or Alfred Hitchcock or maybe Laurel and Hardy, my three sort of specialist subjects at the time, and kind of thinking, well, there's going to be more Bond films. There's never going to be another Alfred Hitchcock directed film, and there's never going to be another Laurel and Hardy film. So it felt like, okay, well, this is something that as long as they keep making them, there isn't an end to it for me, because it's like when you get to the end of talking about all the Alfred Hitchcock films, there's nothing else to really do with it. And James Bond I was always obsessed with since I was a kid anyway, so I read so many books about the films. I hadn't read the Fleming books at that time, or all of them anyway, so it was very much about the films for me. But yeah, so it was just about feeling like, oh, I've got all this kind of knowledge about the series, though I don't like to qualify myself as a James Bond expert, because I know there's many people out there who can tell you all kinds of details about the films that I certainly can't. But I certainly had enthusiasm for it, and again, just opinions that I wanted to get out into the world somehow. And I didn't live in a house with people who were as big Bond geeks as I am, or know anyone who was as big a Bond geek as I was. So it just felt like, okay, this is a soapbox where I can actually do this.
That's awesome. And I think you've really found your niche, and it's, whether it's the pandemic or not, you seem to have been really like churning out some incredible videos, maybe sort of No Time to Die onwards. But let's go back a little bit before No Time to Die. What was your first Bond film that you ever saw, and what sort of impression did that make on you as, I'm guessing a young kid back when you saw it then?
Well, it was Moonraker, so you probably have to be a young kid for it to make an impression on you. I love Moonraker so much. It's that was the one that I saw first, because an aunt of mine bought me it on video for like either birthday or Christmas. I can't quite remember which one. And she got me that and Diamonds Are Forever, because it was a buy one, get one free. And nice. She got Moonraker because I was really in Star Wars, because I was 7, 8 years old, something like that at the time. So, oh, well, you like space and lasers and stuff, so you'll like this. And then, I watched it and adored it, watched Diamonds Are Forever and adored it, which probably explains a lot of my own personal taste when it comes to Bond. Do you find that, like, what was your first, like, couple?
So my first, I believe it was either GoldenEye or Daylights. I can't remember which one was the very first, but it was back when video stores were a thing, young kid. My very responsible parents, I would always go to the action movie section after sort of growing up as a kid and look at all the, the covers for these incredible movies. And I was always drawn to those two in particular, and just begged and pleaded with my parents to let me watch them.
Oh, that's so nice.
And then, they let me watch all the PG rated ones here. So in Australia, our rating system might be a bit different to yours, but basically we've got G, which is essentially kids' films, then PG, which is sort of kids into young adult, M, which is your violent, sort of where most of the Bond films sit, MA, which is your violent, swearing, goring, and then R-rated, which is your Tarantinos. I was allowed to watch the PG-rated ones. That was I wasn't allowed to watch anything. And even though GoldenEye was, you've got a woman who kills people by strangling them during sex and all this sort of stuff. But I think I was also drawn to that because my best friend at the time had a Nintendo, and we'd lock ourselves away playing GoldenEye for weekends and in the rumpus room. I had a PlayStation 1, so naturally I gravitated towards Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough
of course.
On that.
Yes.
So I think those discs, they're still sitting up behind me on the shelf now.
Amazing.
Those discs are so worn out.
What age rating is GoldenEye there then? Is that a PG or an
PG?
M?
PG. Surprisingly.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So PG-13, I guess, is what the states would rate it as.
Right, okay. Because here we have the 12 rating. So here it goes U, PG, 12, 15, 18.
Okay.
And they say that PG is kind of like, if you're over 8, you're probably okay with a PG-rated thing here, but it's...
PG, I think here it's 12 or 13. M, it's recommended for 15 years and older. MA, it's restricted 15 years and older. And R is 18 plus.
My parents were always very liberal about that sort of thing. Like, I was more or less allowed to watch whatever I wanted when I was kind of growing up. So I was watching like South Park when I was like 10, 11 years old. It was kind of ridiculous, really. But the only thing that my mum insisted, you cannot watch this until you are 18, was The Exorcist.
Oh.
And so I was watching other stuff. I was watching like Psycho. I was watching Friday the 13th, Halloween's, like all of those classic slasher things, which are 18. And I was watching all this stuff, and The Exorcist was being built up as like, oh God, it must be something really horrible if I can watch all this. And then that's the one. And then I think I finally did watch it when I was like 19, 20. And I was like, really? That's it? This is what you were like guarding me from? I've like seen so much worse than this. I remember the opening of Constantine, that Keanu Reeves film, has like a exorcism kind of scene. I remember that sort of scaring me when I saw that when I was like 15 or something like that. But then The Exorcist, I was like, but yeah. Were your parents quite strict with it? Like
no, not really. I watched all the Tarantino films when I was in high school, so I would have been 14, 15 at the time. Speaking South Park, that would always be on one of the channels here, SBS, which back then didn't have ads, and they'd always play sort of the, on a Friday, Saturday night, they've got the raunchy French films and all that sort of stuff. But South Park was always on that, and before that, it was Happy Tree Friends, which was that violent as all hell animal animation. So I would always try and beg my parents to let me stay up and watch at least Happy Tree Friends. But I remember my dad one time, he was massive into Thunderbirds and those sort of the puppets and everything. And we went to the video store one night, and I go, "Oh, Dad, check this out. It's just like Thunderbirds." And I hand him Team America. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, cool. It's going to be like Thunderbirds." Doesn't look at the rating, doesn't look at anything. And then we get home, we put the VHS in, and America, fuck yeah. And he's like, "Oh, shit."
Oh, my God.
So go figure.
Oh, wow. Did you watch it together?
Yeah, which is even more awkward with the puppet sex.
I was going to say, getting to that scene, that's probably...
Yeah, I think by then he'd already given up on, you've seen the worst of it.
Because I remember, watching GoldenEye with my parents in the room, and I had to excuse myself whenever the Xenia killing the guy on the boat scene came on with the legs. I'd be like, "Oh, I just need to top up my my Coke or something."
Yeah, I think Famke Janssen was definitely she was an awakening for a lot of young men. That's for sure. Oh, dearie. Let's get back to your channel. Over the past 11 to 12 years now, what's been one of the biggest highlights for you as a creator? And that can be a video that you've put out that you're really passionate about, or an event that you've been awarded the opportunity to attend. Well, what would be one of the biggest highlights for you?
It kind of has to be the No Time to Die premiere, I guess, is like not that was, well, it did come out of sort of as a result of doing the content sort of thing and being involved with people, and it was bless him, David Zaritsky, who invited me along on one of his tickets, so I was really pleased and appreciative of that. But that felt like a bit of a big, like, oh wow, this is something else kind of thing. I'd never been to a premiere like that or anything. And when you see pictures where other people are at them and whatnot, and it looks so cool, and indeed it was. But it was, as much as just that whole week actually was really magical. I know it sounds really wanky to say this, but the people that you meet just doing this kind of stuff is so nice, because I think so many people who I know and speak to started doing podcasts or YouTube videos or whatever for a similar reason to myself, in that you've got friends who maybe like James Bond, but not to the obsessive level that you might. And you kind of, and you do it. And then, you see comments from people, and you can talk in comments, and then you talk on podcasts and on videos and stuff. And it's just nice kind of making friends out of that. And I guess the No Time to Die premiere week was just really exciting because a load of people were coming to London. I'm very lucky that I live here, and it tends to be the epicenter of a lot of Bond events, which I'm very grateful for. But to meet people who I had either never met or hadn't seen in so many months, and that extends to like other things that I've been to. The BFI in London did a special day of Bond screenings. They screened Majesty's Secret Service, Moonraker, and The World Is Not Enough in one big run, because it was each of their kind of anniversaries. It was like 50th for Majesty's, 40th for Moonraker, 20th World Is Not Enough, I think, 2019 this was. And that was really nice, because just, again, meeting people there who sort of like recognized me from YouTube and came up, and you have a chat and stuff. So it's the things like that that are really wonderful. And I'm not very much of an extrovert kind of a person, but it is still like meeting people and having conversations and stuff. It makes it feel kind of worthwhile, I suppose.
I would have to agree with that. I started doing this and sort of my Instagram channel more or less during lockdown and COVID and everything, because I've always been a massive Bond fan. And I think watching yourself for so many years and going, man, you say you're not an extrovert, but your presence on camera, your enthusiasm just shines through. And I can't thank you enough, because your passion is something that, for me especially, being in Melbourne during incredibly difficult lockdowns, where basically out of work for the better part of 2 years, and really plugging along, people like yourself, David, who are making content and breathing a ray of sunshine into a very dark world. It's inspiring. And I can't thank you enough, because it's just what you have done for me as a Bond fan, and brought out my passion again, which was probably waning at the time. It's incredible. So thank you.
Thank you. That's really nice. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
And it's just the people that you meet doing this. I mean, this podcast doesn't have a massive listenership, and I don't do it for the listenership. I do it because I enjoy doing it, and I just enjoy talking about movies and being a nerd. But it's already allowed me to meet incredible people. James Roberts, who runs the James Bond Down Under fan page, and Luke Taggart from Bond's Apartment, yourself. I'm having a chat with David in a couple of days, so I'm very excited by that. So it's just being able to meet people who, as you said, my friends are not Bond nerds, and like my colleagues are definitely not Bond nerds, even though I convince them. We do this like quirky little team photo every year where our graphic designer does like really janky Photoshop and puts us onto like a movie poster or something. I convinced them to do No Time to Die this year. So I was Q in that. I was like, I'm not Bond. I'll be Q. I'll just sit in the background.
I'm the same. I totally empathize with Q more than I do Bond.
Yes.
Yeah.
It might be the glasses. I'm not sure. Well, look, Time to Die. I know you didn't necessarily have the most positive reaction to the film, whether it would be the ending. I know we're well past spoiler embargo now, so we can talk about the fact that they killed Bond and all that sort of stuff. Has that film grown on you, or have you come to appreciate it more in the months since it's released, or conversely, has it got worse in your opinion?
It's weird. Like parts of it have gotten better, parts of it gotten worse. It's because like I've been more than typing up the script. Actually, I've been working on like a big sort of review video of it to kind of purge all of my opinions about it. Because this is the 60th year. We're recording this in the 60th anniversary year, so it is kind of like I think David mentioned it in one of his videos where Zaritsky, where he sort of said like this year should be about celebrating all of the series, and we've all been so sort of focused on No Time to Die for so long because it was always that thing that was just out of reach. And I agree with that. It is nice to kind of think like, oh yes, there are 24 other films that I quite like and would quite like to talk about a bit more. But yeah, with No Time to Die, it's such like no Bond film has stayed in my mind anyway for as long as like after that initial viewing and just like thinking about it for days and like for a couple of days being kind of depressed and just sort of like, oh wow, I don't really know. It's highs and lows. It's the best of Craig's tenure and the worst of Craig's tenure all in one thing for me. So it's very hard to kind of reconcile all of that. And the ending is the ending. So I'm never going to leave it sort of like, leaping off the sofa, like, woohoo, what am I going to do with the rest of my day or night? It's
morose.
Yeah. What about you? Has it gotten better or worse since your initial?
I loved it. And I think for me also because simply we had it delayed a few more months than everyone else in the world. It came out I was nearly 6 months after the premiere, just because of all the fun pandemic stuff. So I was just excited for the fact that we had Bond. So I went into it going, this is I'm going to love it. I'm really going to love it. And I came out of the first screening going, that was incredible. I was like, it's not number one, but it's number two for me. Like sitting behind, in Craig's tenure at least, sitting behind Casino. And now that, the Blu-ray's out and I've had a bit more time to digest, it's still
no time to digest. sorry.
Well, that's going to be the title for this podcast. I love it. It's still probably sitting at number two for me in Craig's tenure. I adore Skyfall. I absolutely adore Skyfall. But there's certain elements of the plot in that film which I just can't look past, the convenient capture of the villain and all of that. And you could say the same about No Time to Die with some of its convenient elements and conveniently, right, Bond's been shot, he's been beaten, the virus, so there's no way he can possibly survive. But somehow I can look past that a little bit more than I can the Silver got captured on this day when he wouldn't know that there was this going on, and little things like that. Yeah,
I completely agree with that, by the way. And I think it's something that like No Time to Die has really kind of made me ruminate on this. And I think I was on a live stream with Joe Darlington of Being James Bond, where I can't remember what the topic was, but he really loved the film. And someone on the call like put to him like a plot hole or something like that. And he was kind of like, this isn't like a tit for tat kind of thing. You either kind of go with it or you don't. Yeah, either like it or you don't. And that's completely like with Skyfall. I'm one of the people who's kind of all right with Silver's whole like escape thing. Like I appreciate it's so contrived. Like it's ridiculous that he can be walking past the exact moment where his minion is coming up with his police uniform and pick the bomb planted in just that spot because he knew that Bond was going to be. It's so much contrivance, but it's it's the shark blowing up at the end of Jaws. It's as a result of that gas canister. It's like that couldn't happen in real life, but you're just with the film. And I think my problem is with No Time to Die, and I discovered this kind of going through it for this in-depth review, is that I'm more than willing to go with it just up until that last third. Like, Safin is the point for me where I can go with the contrivance of, Bond not giving it 5 minutes to kind of ask Madeline, well, are you really in league with Blofeld or not, before he throws her on the train. And there's so many like little things that you just have to kind of buy, like MI6 seemingly not knowing that Madeline had a kid for all that time. And there are these little things that I can overlook, and it doesn't bother me, because obviously, the most logical film in the world is not the best film in the world. No film's logic is completely airtight, but it does kind of just lose me a bit towards the end, I think. And it is one of those things where it's completely up to individual interpretation, really.
Absolutely. When Bond is on his self-sacrifice bit, I think I can look past the contrivances there, because I'm so invested in his character and the emotional journey that he's been on. The Brofeld side of things and all of that, I sort of go, I wish that had stayed with Spectre, but I adore the ending of No Time to Die. I do wish it was a little bit more heroic, and I think David really summed it up in one of his videos, where it doesn't feel like a win. It feels like Blofeld won, or that Safin won. Like Bond, he's going to his death without a bit of a win, which, I mean, if you're thinking Fleming, it's almost poetic in the fact that Fleming wanted to kill him and not give him a happy ending or a heroic ending, because he just ended up hating the character so much.
Just while you bring up Fleming, actually, because this is something else that, again, there have been some monumental shifts in my sort of appreciation of a lot of things recently, I think, particularly around No Time to Die. The whole kind of how people interpret Fleming really is such, like, again, I feel like that's a bit of a Rorschach test. There was one podcast that I was listening to, and I can't for the life of me remember which one it was, around at the time No Time to Die came out. And one of the people on it was saying that they didn't feel like Craig's Bond in No Time to Die was very Fleming-like, because Fleming's Bond loved life. And I was like, wow, that's such a different interpretation of what I'm like. Fleming's Bond to me is quite morose. That's the one, and quite the opposite of loving life, to be honest.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, if you look at You Only Live Twice, which is a book that this so heavily pulled from, he's miserable at the start of that thing. Like he's basically going, I'll go on a suicide mission because I don't have anything to lose. His inner monologue in that book is so depressing compared to, I mean, he's obviously Tracy's dead and all that sort of stuff, but you compare that to, say, Dr. No, even Dr. No, or On Her Majesty's, when I listened to the audiobook that David Tennant narrated recently, and if you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend it, because Tennant's his narration in that is incredible. But one of the passages that stuck with me, and I can't remember it word for word, but it's more along the lines of he hated the Mountain so much. He hated Piz Gloria, and ruminating on the fact that he doesn't want to go back, and he doesn't want to go back to kill Blofeld, because the Mountain itself left such a horrific, nightmarish image in his head. You go, well, you don't see that in Bond, and until No Time to Die, I don't think we've ever seen that personally.
Yeah, no, I don't think we've seen it. Like, I think that Craig's Bond, like, he hits a lot more Fleming moments than a lot of the others do. Like, I think of Skyfall as being a very Fleming Bond performance, like how kind of depressed he is through so much of that, and just kind of out of sorts, doesn't really feel like he has a way in life. And that really resonated with the Fleming Bond that I kind of interpreted from the books anyway. But I think it's just fascinating how people interpret things so differently, and they have these broad views of what the character on the page is, when in reality he hits so many different beats, and it can be kind of whatever you want, really, I suppose.
Exactly. Well, I mean, obviously Craig's tenure's over now, and we're on the hunt for a new Bond, and the series is going to evolve, obviously. In terms of the franchise and the character and the evolution of that, what are some elements that you would hope that they keep from the Craig era, or from Fleming, and what are some of the elements that you'd be just happy to see gone for the next iteration of the character?
Well, I guess I'm not a huge fan of the overarching story. What became quite prominent with Craig's tenure. I still think they're going to continue doing that, because I think that's just very in cinema at the moment. And a lot of the films that you see that are doing really well are sequels and continuing stories. So I think they're going to keep doing it. But I like my Bond films to be self-contained. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard for me to sort of think like, I'll just sit down with Spectre tonight for many reasons, but because it's sort of the continuity aspect of it. It's like, I feel like I should really watch, or Quantum of Solace even. And I think that's probably why I rate them quite low on the Craig films, because Casino Royale and Skyfall I love and I can just watch whenever. Quantum of Solace I feel like I kind of have to watch in close proximity to Casino Royale. But like I say, I would prefer it if they didn't do that. I think they will. In terms of how they use Fleming, I really like what they do with most of the Craig ones, I think, where they've just sort of like cherry-picked elements from the Fleming books. I never want them to go back and do a faithful, remake or anything like that, because I just feel like so many of them have been adapted and they're close enough anyway. I don't think we need to see another Goldfinger for the few scenes. Well, it's so iconic and it's so brilliant, and like the screenplay made changes for the better. Like, I think Goldfinger the film is better than Goldfinger the book.
Agreed.
Right. But I do like it when they just cherry pick, like the Poison Garden. I really liked that coming up in No Time to Die. And there's still plenty of stuff there that they can use, so I'm more than happy for them to just cherry pick stuff from Fleming and kind of apply that to a contemporary set Bond. And I do prefer my Bonds to be sort of with the times as well. I'm not a fan of the idea of them going period, nor do I think they will, because I think you'd lose all your sponsorships and product placements.
Agreed. And I think if you look at something like The King's Man versus Kingsman,
brilliant. I hadn't considered this, but you're absolutely right.
Great film, but it lost a lot of its appeal, I think, to the younger audiences going to a World War One, because, and I love the character building and the world building that they did in that, but they had to spend a good chunk of that film explaining what the hell was going on in World War One, because, outside of, history buffs or people who have, looked into it, no one knows who Archduke Ferdinand is, and no one really cares about the bloodlines of the English kings and all that sort of stuff. And I think for a general viewing audience, that probably took away from the enjoyment. And I could see Bond having to do a similar thing, going, all right, we're going back to whether it's the 50s or the 60s, Cold War era, or heck, even, Bond coming out of World War II. They'd have to do a lot of explaining, and there'd be a lot more exposition with that, and I don't think it would, resonate with modern audiences nearly as much as what a modern one would.
I absolutely hadn't considered that. You are bang on with that. I think that is so spot on. They would have to sort of spend like 10 minutes explaining what the Cold War even was, probably, for audiences that either don't know it or are too young, didn't study it in history or whatever. And I was just thinking about like other instances, because some Bond films are quite contemporary. I think of Man with the Golden Gun when they refer to the energy crisis, which I think works when you watch it now, but it would have had that extra bit of relevance to it when it first came out. Maybe even No Time to Die, though I think, the virus sort of stuff, I know it's nanobots in the film, but that whole kind of virus thing, they obviously preempted that, but that had an extra bit of resonance for the now. But you're absolutely right. I bet they're gonna kind of hold up The King's Man as a example of why not to do it, basically. Probably
even The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Love that film. Guy Ritchie did that really well, but I don't think it was much of a financial success, hence why we haven't seen any sequels of it.
You are absolutely right. Yeah. And you think of any sort of like set in the past action film that has done quite well, like action thriller kind of thing. I obviously Captain America and the Marvel things have done it, but
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Not really, because even like Atomic Blonde, I know we're supposedly getting a sequel for that, but that that wasn't particularly financially successful either. I don't
yeah,
think. I'm trying to think of anything that's come out really in the last 10 to 20 years, and no,
that's
nothing
really
that really
interesting.
jumps
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
I guess Indiana Jones. I mean, that's going back a long way to Indiana Jones 4. It was a big hit at the time
Yeah, and that's
financially.
riding off the name as well. Like
Very true.
big time, you're going, oh, I want to see Indy, and you're expecting it to be set in that time because it's
Yeah.
Harrison Ford. It's well, if they're not going to reboot it with Shia LaBeouf as Indiana Jones, you've got to expect it to be in that time period to an extent.
Yeah.
Oh, God, even Tintin. Like I loved Tintin, but that
Yeah.
nothing has come of that either. So
That's very true. I need to rewatch that actually.
so good. It's so good.
I saw it at the cinema and I remember really liking it.
Yeah, the oh man, Tintin, Asterix and Obelix, all those sort of like comic book French and Belgian comics when I was growing up as a kid were just my favorite thing in the whole world. So I love Tintin come up on screen. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. No, sorry, I interrupted. Go on.
I was just going to say, I think Spielberg and Lucas really knocked it out of the park with that one.
Oh, cool. I was just going to ask, are you big into comics? Have you read any of the James Bond comics?
I have. I've actually started going back to them. I don't have any. Well, I've got one of the omnibuses of the newspaper type ones. But I've recently started going back just on like the comics app on my phone, going back to
nice.
all the Dynamite ones and sort of reading through those, and they're interesting. There's elements of them where I go, I like this, I really like this, and then there's elements where I go, that's not James Bond. Like it just feels like an action story. Have you read any of them at all?
I read. Was the first one called Varga? I read
one of the earlier ones. Yeah.
I read that one. I've got a couple of the sort of compendiums, collections, whatever. But I've just not got around to reading them yet.
They're worth a read, and I think probably the Greg Pak one is my favorite, where it's Odd Job. It's like a reimagining of Odd Job, basically, where he's a South Korean agent, and the name Odd Job is almost like a 00 status. So he's like taken over from. So the previous Odd Job from sort of the Goldfinger era was like this older spy, and Bond goes back and talks to like an older agent, and because he's going, oh, this guy, Korean, he's like, oh yeah, there was someone who I dealt with back in the 60s who was exactly the same, and Bond's going, well, he's using all these moves, and he must be the new Odd Job that the Koreans have got working for them, and it's almost like this tit for tat partnership where they're one upping each other, and you don't know if you can trust Odd Job and all this sort of stuff. It's really cool. Like the whole concept of it's awesome.
I never heard about this. This sounds incredible. I didn't realize that they were going off in that kind of spin-off direction. That's really interesting.
But it stayed self-contained because they never really did much with that sort of storyline afterwards. I know they did like a modern redoing of Goldfinger as well. That was in that. Actually, that was within that. I'm pretty sure within that story. I can't remember now. It's really bad. But they almost did a modern retelling of Goldfinger through that as well. And if they were to do a modern Goldfinger, like I don't want them to do a remake of the book or anything. I'd be happy with them going along, like taking inspiration from that comic out of anything. Definitely worth a read. Definitely worth a read.
Check this out. What's it called? Is it called Odd Job?
I think it's just called the James Bond. I'm pretty sure it was just James Bond 007 by Greg Pak.
Oh, okay. Greg Pak. Okay, I'm going to look out for this.
It's a really cool story. Like Bond comes to Australia and all this sort of stuff. So I'm going, James Bond in Australia.
Have you ever read
the Outback Sorry, go on.
Have you ever read any of the John Gardner continuation books?
A couple of them. I think as a kid, I tried to read, was it License Renewed? And I can't remember the other one. The one with the skull on the cover, black cover with like a blue skull.
It wouldn't be Icebreaker?
Icebreaker, yes.
Was that the one? Right, yeah.
Yeah, I read those two as a kid, but funnily enough, I actually came back to them when you started doing the Gardner reviews.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On your channel. No. I want you to go back. That was one of the questions I had for you was, when are you coming back to the continuations?
Oh, I've been trying to read. I mean, the reason why I brought it up is because I've been trying to read Roll of Honor, which is, I think, the fourth John Gardner one. I must have started it and restarted about 3 or 4 times now. So I'm very familiar with James Bond's Australian Uncle Bruce, who was mentioned in the first few pages.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't read that.
I just wondered because of the Australia reference. But yeah, Bond has a Uncle Bruce in Australia who dies and he gets a big inheritance from him. And it's like, it is one of those things that you read and you're like, what the hell am I reading? This does not sound anything like James Bond.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I have a great Uncle Bruce who, in my inheritance, unfortunately he's still alive. He hasn't passed away. He's unfortunately got an eye condition. But he was one of my big influences of being a Bond fan because he basically gifted me his Fleming collection. And a young kid being handed like a couple of first edition Flemings and all this sort of stuff. So that's Uncle Bruce, James Bond. Okay, weird, but
that's quite prophetic, actually, isn't it?
Right?
God,
yeah.
Wow. Well, fascinating. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I've never gotten to the end of the story, so I don't know if Uncle Bruce comes back later on, but yeah, I'll get around to it eventually. It's such a different thing. Like, you probably had the same thing if you only read 2 of the Gardner ones. It's very different to Fleming.
Very different. What are your thoughts on the continuation series as a whole? Have you got any favorites out of that? Have you read most of them, or?
I tell you what, actually, because I was trying my damnedest to go through them in like chronological order, start with Casino Royale, Ian Fleming, and just work all the way through. So I've read Colonel Sun, which I thought was great. Like, I thought that was I think that was the first continuation novel.
I believe it was. Yeah.
That was like, you could have told me Fleming wrote it, and I would have been convinced. Like, it was really good. It was different, but it was close enough that it really did capture his spirit, I think. I tell you what, the Christopher Wood novelization of The Spy Who Loved Me was so much better than I thought it was going to be. He obviously co-wrote, or I can't remember. I think he has like a co-writing credit on Spy Who Loved Me, the script, and he has I think he has the sole writing credit on Moonraker, but he wrote those 2 films and he did the novelizations for both of them. The Moonraker one I thought was good, but very much read like a novelization where it feels like, you just going through the film, and there are a few extra details here and there. But that's about it. Whereas The Spy Who Loved Me novelization was quite different from the film in several regards, and it went all the way back into Stromberg's kind of history, and his motivations are slightly different. There's a torture sequence where Bond has electrodes like clamped to his bollocks and he's being zapped through them, which is really, it's really like, that definitely didn't happen with Roger Moore in the role.
Yeah.
But it's really good. I would recommend that. You might have to go on eBay to find it these days, because I don't think it's been printed in God knows how long, but that I was really surprised at. And that's probably been my favorite, actually, of the continuations so far. I've not read any of the more recent ones, so the Anthony Horowitz or anything like that. Have you?
Yes, the Horowitz ones are great.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of... I like the Raymond Benson ones. I enjoy the Raymond Benson ones for what they are. I'm not a huge fan of... I've completely mind blanked on the other authors, but never mind, because I wasn't a huge fan anyway. But the Horowitz ones, you talk about Colonel Sun being sort of feeling like Fleming. Horowitz, especially with Forever and a Day, it feels like he was ghostwriting for Fleming.
Oh, like amazing.
The style, the tone, it's fun, there's romance in it, and each of his books, they take... He's basically doing like, it's a section of Bond's life within the literary universe as they go along. So Forever and a Day is basically a prequel to Casino Royale. then Trigger Mortis, which he wrote first, but Trigger Mortis is a continuation almost of Goldfinger. Like it picks up with, because he's basically shacked up with Pussy Galore, and Pussy Galore's like his girlfriend in it, and like it sort of follows on from that. And then the new one that's coming out this year for 60th anniversary, from what I've read at least, is going to be a continuation after Golden Gun. So it's going to be a lot darker and all that sort of stuff, where he's at the end of his tenure and finishing off. So highly recommend. Listen to the audiobooks as well, because was it David Oyelowo did Trigger Mortis, and Matthew Good did Forever in a Day, and both of them are awesome. Like really good audiobooks.
Oh, excellent. Oh, okay, good. I will be, because I've been thinking, like, John Gardner wrote a lot. And I think I'm going to need some breaks. Yeah, so I don't think my goal of going through the whole official literary canon chronologically isn't going to happen. So I was thinking, like, maybe I will, like, pepper in a Horowitz here and there.
They're easy reads too, like very easy reads. Good. They're not thick by any extent, like in terms of, you don't have to think, which is nice.
Did you ever read, when you were a kid, did you read the Alex Rider books, the Anthony Horowitz ones?
I have all of them sitting out on my shelf, and
brilliant.
I've just finished watching season 2 of the Amazon or IMDb or whoever it is that's producing it in the world. It's Amazon here.
I found it on Amazon here, but they did have these weird like adverts, or it was on Amazon, but they had a thing like saying through IMDb TV, and I'm like, what is that about? I have no idea.
I know Amazon owns IMDb, but it was a weird one that they did. I enjoyed that series a lot. Much more than the film. The film was god awful. With, Alex Pretty Fairy. How
have I not heard that before? That's really good. I completely agree. Get Toby Stevens in the second season giving why wasn't this in the Bond film? I thought he was really good in that.
And there was so many elements where I'm watching this going, that's Gustav Graves. Like, he's the famous industrialist that everyone trusts. There's a scene where he's like controlling a drone with these gloves, and the climax is on a bloody aeroplane, and I'm going, is this Die Another Day, but like better?
I was watching it with my partner, who has not seen. He's definitely not a Bond fan like I am, but he hasn't seen Die Another Day. But every now and then, I'd be like, "This is just like in the Bond film where he's." It was pretty funny.
So this is a question I've got, because my fiance, she's not a Bond fan either, and you're saying your partner's not one either. How do they cope with your Bond insanity? Because Leah really struggles sometimes. Like, she'll watch them with me, but she's not like, she hasn't seen No Time to Die yet. I saw that 3 times in cinemas. I've watched it, I think, twice since I've had it on Blu-ray. Like, she'll come and see, like, say, Goldfinger when they do sort of a rerun at the cinemas or something like that, but it's not necessarily something that she'll actively choose to sit and watch. How does your partner put up with your Bond fanaticism?
It sounds like we're in very similar boats with this. My partner's really he's very supportive, and he we went to watch No Time to Die together when it came out, because I think it was my 3rd viewing at that time, but I want to see it in the BFI IMAX, where it's this huge screen in London. And he came to that, and obviously building up to that, I said, we need to watch all of the Craig films. So we did that. He'd seen Skyfall before, because he hadn't seen any Bond films at all when we started dating. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to change this. And I picked Skyfall as the first one, which he liked. And then we watched GoldenEye, which he didn't like that much. So I know. So
get out of here. What?
I know, right? And same for The World Is Not Enough. So
I can understand that. That's polarizing. Yeah.
But Casino Royale, we went to the Casino Royale Secret Cinema in London when that was on, and watched the film, and he loved that. He loved even watching it again during the Secret Cinema thing. So so like, we'll watch and enjoy and be very supportive of me and my very nerdy niche hobby. But otherwise it sounds like we're in very similar boats. Yeah,
little bit. Well, back on Bond and off ourselves a little bit more. Now that obviously we're in the 60th anniversary and we're gearing up into the new era of James Bond. As someone who is so heavily invested in the franchise, how do you see the franchise evolving over the next, say, 10, 20 years or whatever it is? How's it going to reach younger audiences, and how do you think they can keep Bond relevant in the 21st century?
I think a lot of what they're going to have to, and I think we're seeing sort of the wheels start moving on this a bit more now. Maybe it's just because it feels like we've been through such a content drought, and now we have like an Anthony Horowitz book on the horizon. There's a new Bond game on the horizon. I think they're going to have to kind of rev up the output, just stuff, even if they're not going to make, a streaming TV show or anything like that, which I'm kind of fine with them not doing. It's like I can barely keep up with the Marvel stuff and the Star Wars stuff these days. Like sometimes you can just be overwhelmed with stuff. And I'm glad that Bond doesn't do that. At the same time, you need to have stuff out there, because I can't believe that it's been so long since Spectre, and like I think when we were growing up, actually, because we're similar ages, and with the Pierce Brosnan films, they were coming out in quite a good succession, and we had games, and it just always felt like there was a lot of presence that isn't really there anymore, I don't think. So I think it's going to be about rejuvenating that, maybe making sure that films come out every 3 years or so.
Nice. Pandemic withstanding, yeah,
exactly. I mean that would be my sort of hope, I guess. What about you? What do you think about this?
So I had this conversation with Luke from Bond's Apartment last week, where we were sort of talking about merchandise and the 007 store, and how we both don't think that they're hitting the right mark in terms of reaching out to younger audiences, especially with their merch, things that they're bringing out at the minute, at least. Like you get a 20-pound lunchbox, which cool. It's a bit of history and it's a tin lunchbox. But for me in Australia, 20 pounds is $40 plus then probably $50 worth of shipping. I'm spending $100 on a tin lunchbox, which I could probably get from Target for the Avengers or something like that for 10.
In London, all the kids are walking around with those, 12 grand lighters, lighting their cigarettes on the street, And
the tuxedo teddy bears. Like, it's, I understand the history of the teddy bear and everything, but at the same time, it's like, man, growing up as a kid, like you being in the UK, Action Man would have been quite a big thing over there as well. I know Action Man was big here compared to, say, G.I. Joe. I remember through the Brosnan era, we had all the Action Man, figurines. I've got my Spy Who Loved Me one, and there was a GoldenEye one, a Tomorrow Eyes one, a World Is Not Enough one, and they did a couple of the older ones as well. And there were toy cars, and I know we get the Hot Wheels and stuff now, and the Lego piece, but I don't think we've really got any cool memorabilia for Bond in the way that you say Star Wars or Marvel. They're putting out the Black Series figurines, all these really cool things that we haven't really got anything like that for Bond. And growing up, I'm 28, so I'm probably nearly 28, I should say, a couple of years younger than you, but we both grew up probably with the, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, the PS2 games, Everything or Nothing, Nightfire, Agent Under Fire, like all these games. And Bond was, because it was basically Call of Duty back in the day in terms of its gaming presence. Every year everyone goes, okay, what's the next Call of Duty game going to be? Back then it was, what's the next Bond game going to be? And we were all really excited for the next Bond game. And then they dropped the ball with Legends, and to a point, GoldenEye was okay, but like we haven't really had a good Bond game. I mean, Bloodstone was okay, but the marketing for that, they released it on the same bloody day as GoldenEye. The dumbest move possible.
Someone pointed out to me as well, I think it was like the week after, or maybe the week before, or even the same day as they did release like another Call of Duty as well, like around that same time, which just seems like such an insane like marketing.
You're trying to come up against some of the biggest franchises, and then you're putting yourself up against the biggest franchise within your own franchise as a game. Like,
It's nuts, isn't it?
Dumb
Yeah.
move. So we haven't had a Bond game in several years now, so I'm very, very excited for this IO Interactive one, the Hitman makers.
Oh yes.
But why haven't they put James Bond in Fortnite?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Like you've had John Wick, you've had the Avengers. Like they did a whole bloody season around the Avengers. Yeah, we got like the DB5 in Rocket League, I think it was the soccer game, but it's Rocket League. Do really that many people play it? Fortnite's the biggest game in the world. Like, sell a James Bond skin, sell a Nomi skin, a Safin skin, Safin with the mask. Like, kids would get really hyped about that. I know Barbara doesn't really want to see Bond, bang, bang, shoot him. And she's, been vocal about the killing aspects of the previous games and how she didn't like that. But I think that's a real missed opportunity there. Sorry, I'm rambling.
No. I find this all really interesting, and I completely agree with you as well. And I think that whole, the aspect of them being so reluctant to have Bond killing people in games just feels so strange and bizarre.
Like Nightfire, where you couldn't play as Bond if. Like you couldn't kill Bond or something weird.
You couldn't be on the character select thing. You had all of the different characters, and obviously you had Bond, you had Pussy Galore, Waylon, Christmas Jones, and then the good guy characters from that game. If there were 4 of you playing and one of you picked a good guy character, no one else could be a good guy character because the good guy characters can't kill each other.
That's
and
right.
That was so that. And that was in played The World Is Not Enough on the Nintendo 64 for the first time not that long ago, and it was in there as well. Amazing. Oh gosh, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, I see it now in your background. Yeah, that's awesome.
Nintendo and PlayStation.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's eBay purchased the Nintendo one. I've got the game, but I don't have a Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, I've got it, but I played it on the emulator. That's
hell. I tried to do that with GoldenEye and trying to remap the controls for an Xbox controller.
Oh, I just about got the hang of it eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, even in that game, and in that game, they have so many like good guy characters. You can play as Judi Dench's M in the multiplayer. It's crazy.
I remember, yeah.
But you can't, like, if one of you is a good guy character, no one else can be. And it's so bizarre. Like, I don't understand why they make these weird rules, because is that gonna... What does that do if someone plays as M and someone plays as, Sir Robert King from The World Is Not Enough, and they kill each other in a video game? Who cares? But yeah, apparently it's very important.
Well, speaking of games and the IO Interactive game, have you played the Hitman games at all?
I have, yeah. Yes, and I think they're really they're very intricate and probably a bit too intricate for me. I don't know. There's a lot of I could play them through like once or twice the levels, but then I guess my incentive to go back and repeat. And I get that is the point of doing them, to do them over again and notice all these different ways and different methods. I didn't really gel with that too much, so I'm not sure what that. Yeah, I hope that bodes okay for Bond. But how do you feel about the Hitman games? You played them.
I love them. Yeah, I've played all of them right from the very first one, and I thoroughly enjoy the new ones made by IO. And I agree with you, though. I don't think I would like that sandbox structure to come across, in terms of it's a little world that you can explore and find different paths through to complete the objective. It's not, Grand Theft Auto, where it's a massive world. And it's not like, say, 007 Legends, where it was basically an arcade on-rails shooter. What would you like to see from the new Bond game? Are there any sort of things that you'd go, this is going to be my perfect Bond game?
I think that there are already a ways there for me. I mean, my big thing is like an original story, or something that isn't in the films. Like, I loved the Brosnan games like Nightfire, Agent Under Fire, Everything or Nothing, because it felt like they were filling in the gap in between films, and they were still like cinematic Bond stories, but you were just controlling Bond through them. And I think that's the best thing about the games. I think Bloodstone also did that. I thought the Quantum of Solace game was pretty good actually. But I just don't go back to it as much because it doesn't have its own identity like the other ones do.
Yep.
And I get that it's a harder sell for the marketing when it comes to those kinds of things because, selling a original concept is probably more difficult than a movie tie-in. But yeah, I guess that's my big thing, really, the story. I just want to have, kind of like a new story to talk about. Yeah.
There's so many things that I could see them doing and that they won't do. Like they could do, you can choose your Bond skin, so you could play as Connery or play as Roger Moore or Lazenby or, pick and choose that sort of stuff as like DLC or have I said I don't want a Battle Royale James Bond game, but the more I think of it, and there's an artist called Porkchop Bob. I'm not sure if you've seen his sort of stuff. I think Mark O'Connell has posted a couple of his animated, like, sort of style pictures.
Yes, it did. Was there was the Bond villain?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I keep going back to that and going, I would love a battle royale similar to like Team Fortress or something like that, where it's in that sort of like block art animated style and you could play as the different villains from Bond. And I think that could be so cool. There's so much opportunity there.
There really is, isn't there? Yeah, it's I'm so excited. I was so excited when it was announced that they were going to be doing a new Bond game because it was high time, I think.
Definitely. Is there anything that you hope to see come from the 60th anniversary? Be it, are they going to announce a new actor? Are they going to, announce the new film? Is there anything that you hope to see come from this year?
I guess a new actor would be like a cherry on top. Like if they can, like the rumors are already starting. Like I was on Twitter earlier on and people were talking about like they're going to potentially announce the new actor after the BAFTAs. And I can't imagine that happening that soon.
That pretty
seems a bit
close, isn't it? That's like,
that's
March?
like,
yeah.
Which I'm like, I don't know where that rumors come from, but I think we are just in that time now where we're going to see a lot of headlines, a lot of clickbait sort of stuff, so be wary.
Speculation.
I know, right? If we can have a new Bond by the end of the year, that would be a wonderful cherry on top, and I hope that's not too unrealistic to think. But probably my biggest hope aside from that is getting a 4K box set release of the films. I would love that. Yeah, that would be fantastic, and like really nice new transfers of the Pierce Brosnan ones I would really like, but we'll see. I'm such a physical media, like home media buff, and I love 4K Blu-rays, all that kind of stuff. So
Agreed.
Bond 4K box set would be lovely. And then there's this potential 25th anniversary release of the N64 GoldenEye, which I'm really looking forward to, just like praying, hoping that that's going to happen.
Have you got an Xbox?
Yeah, I haven't. So
you're gonna have to make the investment.
Well, I'm hoping that it's going to come out on the Switch in some capacity.
Because that is true with Nintendo, right? But I know Microsoft owns Rare, and Rare obviously made GoldenEye, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's an Xbox exclusive.
How I think it might happen is I think they're going to release just like a straight up port on the Nintendo Switch. I think that Xbox will get that remastered version that Rare made like a few years ago that never got released. I think Xbox will get that full, all the new bells and whistles version, whereas the Switch will get the... I think it'll just get put on there because they have that subscription service where they throw on a load of old N64 games. I think it'll probably go on there, but I think I have a feeling the Xbox will get like the premium version of it, and I'm going to be like, oh god damn it, do I buy an Xbox for this one game?
I've got a spare one if you want mine. Agreed. I think that'd be really cool, actually, the Switch getting like the original. I mean, I'll have to steal my fiance's Switch if they do that. Speaking of actors, I know this is a loaded question. 2 questions. Bond 26, who in Calvin Dyson's mind do you want to be the actor? And seeing as we've had all these interviews with different actors recently, we've had Bong Joon-ho do an interview with Barbara Broccoli. We've had Guillermo del Toro. Actor and director, who do you want?
Can I go with director first? Because this one I have a couple of things that I'd really love. I would love actually Kerry Fukunaga to come back and do another one. I would love it if he had an opportunity to set the stage for a new Bond, or Edgar Wright. I would love Edgar Wright to. That would be like dream kind of stuff for him to do it. And I think he has the right sensibilities and the tastes for the kind of Bond film that I would quite like to have, with a bit more sort of lighthearted, but still serious and having emotional weight, but just a bit sort of more fun. A lot like what a lot of the elements in No Time to Die were. That I liked about that film. Actor, I honestly don't know. It's I kind of want it to be someone who I don't know and who hasn't been like one of the tabloid kind of darlings. I will say that I do really like. There's a couple of actors. Josh O'Connor, I really like, who was Prince Charles in The Crown, and he was in God's Own Country, which was a really great film. And James Norton, I also quite like. He's been in some like British TV stuff, and I think either of those two are just at a level where they're not known in film for other things. Like I know that Henry Cavill is often touted, and I think you look at him and you think like, yep, that's a Bond right there. He looks just like a Bond should, but I feel like he's too high profile. I feel like
agreed. Yeah. Especially with he's now The Witcher. I think he's just picked up, was it Mass Effect, the games? They're doing a series adaptation, and he's attached to that. I think we talk about Bond movies not coming out enough. If he's attached to all these different properties, we're never going to get a Bond film if he's cast.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. Yeah, and I think he's doing some.
I'm not a massive fan as an actor as well, but anyway, sorry, go on.
You're not a massive fan of him as an actor.
I mean, the Witcher. The Witcher series has sort of redeemed him a little bit for me, but I just find him very wooden. And I know he's a massive nerd, and he seems like a lovely guy, and he has a lot of passion for Warhammer and The Witcher and all that sort of stuff, and he brings that passion to what he does, but I don't think he's a very good actor. I'm very much the same. It is one of those things where just like look at a still of him, you think, in a tuxedo, slap him on the front of a book, a Bond book or something. He's just like that perfect cover model kind of thing. But I don't know. I've never really loved any performance. I think he's pretty good in Man from U.N.C.L.E., but and I think that's what everyone's gone. Henry Cavill's going to be James Bond after that. But I for me personally, in terms of actors, I'm very much still waving the Max Irons flag. I think he'd be phenomenal. Jeremy Irons' son. He was he's English, but he was in an American series called Condor, which is a remake of the Robert Redford film and an adaptation of the 3 Days of the Condor.
Yes.
Brilliant in that. And series 2, they sort of go more like spies versus spies, and he's smoking against a bridge, and he's scarred from the events of the first one. I think he'd be very cool. And he's not a household name either. And then I look at like completely left of field someone. I mean, Nicholas Hoult, I could see come into it as well, because he's grown up. He's in that sort of early 30s age. He's a name, but he's not a name. I love Idris Elba, but 10 years too late. Definitely. He's pushing late 40s now, I think. As much as I would have loved to have seen that, because Luther is one of my all-time favorite shows.
It's great. Yeah,
we're too late on that bandwagon. So if we're going down that route, I think someone like I've just completely mind blanked on his name. I'm doing really well today, Calvin.
It's still early for you.
Finn from Star Wars.
John Boyega.
John Boyega, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I think he'd bring something really unique to it as well, and he could carry it for a while. I think he'd be quite a unique take on the character. Yeah,
I completely agree, actually. And he has like, so sometimes it's I think that they like going for actors who don't love being the part, like with Craig, there was always that surliness to him. Like I don't doubt that he loved being James Bond and playing that part, and I think he relished it, and they did really interesting things with him in the lead. But I just think of like Pierce, who loved being in the role so much, and he got kind of a bum deal, and I feel like there is always that. Yeah, even Connery like got to a point where he kind of resented the part, and people love him in it, and yeah, not that I think that John Boyega would resent being in the part, but I don't know. He has a certain kind of
he doesn't like celebrity. I think similar to Craig, like he's very heavily into the activist side of things, and he's always spoken his mind about, I know with Star Wars, for instance, all the stuff that happened with, Finn was supposed to be one of the leads, and then he was basically put on the back shelf as a comedy character, and then you look at the Chinese, and he's basically this tiny little thing because God forbid having a black lead in a big studio property. He's been very vocal about his experience with that, and how he was going to be the next basically sort of lead alongside Daisy Ridley, and got a bit of a bung deal, and ever since then he's similar to Craig, been a little bit reserved in the spotlight. So I can see what you're saying with that. Yeah, definitely.
You articulated that so much better than I was doing. Like, thank you for making sense of that.
I'm listening to you. I've got a little bit of time to think about it while you're talking. Yeah. So, and directors wise, man, Edgar Wright, that's an inspired choice. I think we were robbed of him doing Ant-Man. I think he would have done such a good job with that. Someone else who I always think, obviously Matthew Vaughn would he'd be great. But Catherine Bigelow, I think, would be a really good director for Bond, because she's done big fun action with something like Point Break. Yeah, she does that sort of human element, big scope stuff with The Hurt Locker, and she's done espionage with Zero Dark 30 and that more grounded approach to things. I think she would bring something really unique to it. I don't want Nolan.
No, I'm the same. It's I just feel like it'd be fun deficient. Well, I feel like Nolan's one of those people who, like, exactly what kind of film he's going to make if he has Bond, and I kind of like the idea that even the other directors, like Catherine Bigelow that you said, Edgar Wright, there's enough variation in their filmographies that I would still be like, I wouldn't quite know what to expect from them going into it. Whereas Christopher Nolan, it's like, yep, I know exactly what kind of thing he's going to make.
Yep. We saw that with Tenet and Inception. Yes. Like, I can almost see exactly sort of the route he'd go down with. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything I had sort of written down to discuss. I know we've been going for about an hour now, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me and talk all things Bond, because I've wanted for so long to just be able to talk to you. So this is incredible that finally getting the chance to get you on. In terms of other creators in the Bond space, I know you're sort of the pinnacle of Bond. You and David and Joe are sort of these gods. I'd like to say. Oh my God,
that's far too kind.
I mean, there's other people who've come and gone and create stuff, or they speak about, as much as I like to say someone like Lorenzo or Luke, they're very heavily into the sartorial aspect of things, whereas you really cover such a broad gamut when it comes to Bond. You don't pigeonhole yourself into it, and your passion just shines through. But in terms of other creators, is there anyone who you'd like to shine a spotlight on in the Bond community that think might not necessarily get that spotlight and deserves a little bit of praise for what they're doing?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's a really good, because I'm nervous about missing someone out now, because I watch so many like Bond channels, and I listen to so many different Bond podcasts. I mean, Blunt Instruments, like I've been on that.
Likewise.
And but that was one that I was listening to and was really like, oh yeah, I want to chat to these guys. Like, I mean, and just going back to what we were talking about earlier, like having this conversation here, it is just sort of like, it's nice to do this. Like, I think it's just nice to like chat and just like have a nice conversation. And that's what that was one that I listened to, and I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind going on there and chatting to them. So that's one that I really like. Yeah, and then oh gosh, I watched recently. There's a new Bond channel that launched, I should really say. Bond. Oh my gosh, I hope I'm not saying this wrong. Bond Double OXL, I think it is.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
you got it right. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, because I watched that, and again, a very much sartorial channel. And I admit I'm definitely not a sartorial expert. I'm the kind of person who, if I didn't have the social pressure to wear different clothes every day, I would just wear a black jumper and jeans every day of my life. That's just what but I've learned so much about it, and I think the lifestyle aspect of Bond is so important and built into the formula. Like I was watching some Bond trailers for a video that I was making recently, and in the one of the first trailers for Doctor No, in the first 10 seconds, it pauses on a frame of Connery and points to his shirt, points to his tie, points to his blazer, and this is his blazer from blah blah blah. And it's oh wow, even in the promotional material, in the first instance, they're talking about his clothes and how it affects the character and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was really fascinating. I hadn't seen that trailer before.
I'll have to get you to send that to me, because I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah. I think it's on the home media discs, but I can point you in the direction of the right one, because there's millions of trailers on those discs. But yes, but Bond Double OXL. I thought, God, I'm really sorry, I can't remember the gentleman's name now, but he was. I remember watching the video, and he had such a wonderful soothing voice, and just really fascinating to listen to, just a natural presenter right from the off. And I thought oh God, he's so brilliant, doing this very it was lovely. I really enjoyed that.
His interview with Luke is really good as well. I highly recommend watching that on the Bond's Apartment channel.
Yes, I haven't watched it. It was on there
recently. Well worth a listen. Yeah.
Oh nice. Okay, I will do that. Yeah.
And one more. We'll round it out with your top 3 that you'd recommend people checking out.
Well, I tell you what, I was on God, I'm having a complete brain fade. Oh my God, Henry Stevens, God, the Bond Geek on YouTube. I was on his channel recently, and we had a great conversation on there. And he does a lot of really interesting sort of explorations about a lot of if Dalton had another film, and what if Lazenby did more, and all that kind of stuff, which I find really interesting to listen to. So yeah, I'd go with Henry there for the Bond Geek on YouTube. Yeah,
and I'll put the links obviously in the show notes as well, so everyone can check them out if anyone's interested. But I just wanted to say thank you again for coming on, Calvin. We'll wrap it up here. Where can everyone find you online to follow what you do and the stuff that you create?
Well, if you just go to YouTube and search Calvin Dyson, should find me on there. Just youtube.com/Calvin Dyson. I think you'll find my channel there. And I'm quite lucky that there aren't that many other Calvin Dysons in the world. So if you just Google my name, you should be able to find my Twitter.
Famous last name too. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised that there aren't more. But I'm sadly not related to the vacuum kingpin. Oh well.
Indeed. Well, and I'll link everything in terms of your YouTube and Instagram and everything that you create as well.
Cheers,
and I know that you do a podcast as well. That's something that completely not Bond related, but if you want to give that a plug as well.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. Yes, Diminishing Returns podcast. That's something that I do with a couple of my friends from university, Sol and Alan. We have talked about almost all of the Bond films in turn now. They're definitely not Bond fans. In fact, they don't even like that many of them. So it's some interesting conversations. If you want to see me up against people who are just this is stupid, Calvin, why do you like this stuff? Then check out the Bond episodes of that. But then we also go over a lot of other films as well. And all kinds of series, Marvel films, Fast and the Furious, all that kind of stuff. But nice. Do check it out. Fantastic. Diminishing Returns.
Awesome. And again, I'll put that in the show notes. But I just wanted to say a massive thank you again for coming on, Calvin. It means the absolute world to me, and I'm so honored to have you on. Having followed you for so many years now, it's really, really cool to finally. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on the chat.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and thank you very much for all of your kind words and stuff. It's very humbling, so I really appreciate it. And keep up the great work that you've been doing, because Yeah, I've had a few episodes so far, and it's great. And I think you're a natural presenter. I really enjoyed your podcast with oh my God, David, License to Queer. God, you can tell it's late. I'm dropping people's names. Lowbridge Ellis.
Yeah.
Lowbridge Ellis. God. I'm recording with David in a couple of days as well, actually. I'm like, sorry, my brain's just fading. It must be that.
Early morning for me. I'm brain fading. It's late night for you. So we're doing well.
But anyway, yes, keep up the great work. And thank you very much for having me on, because I've really enjoyed this. It's been a great chat. So we're going to have to do it again soon sometime.
Definitely. I would love that. So this has been Selling Secrets podcast with me, your host, Josh Gay, and my fantastic guest, Calvin Dyson. Calvin, once again, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
So that was my interview with Calvin Dyson. Once again, thank you to Calvin for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with him. He's a real gentleman for coming on and speaking all things James Bond and movies with me. You can find all the topics and accounts that we spoke about in the interview in the show notes below, as well as all of Calvin's social media links. You can also find Selling Secrets online on Instagram at Selling Secrets Pod, as well as on Facebook if you just search in Selling Secrets Podcast. And you can find me, your host, Josh Gay, on Instagram at 007Oz, which is at 007AUS. Here's a sneak peek of next week's episode, which is an interview with David Zaritsky, aka The Bond Experience.
I'll never forget when the first delay came, and I sort of dug my heels in. First person I always call with these events is Joe Darlington from Being James Bond, and we always talk. And I called him and I said, "Whoa, dude! You see, when those things happen, people kind of wane. They say, I've had it. I'm putting Bond in a box." That was the term. I'm going to put Bond in the box and then take it out when it gets closer to when the film comes out. And I just said to Joe, you know what? I think I'm going to do the opposite. I think I'm actually going to do more videos, maybe 3 a week instead of 2, or I'm going to have more Instagram posts, because people need content. People, want this Bond. Plus, I personally and selfishly don't have that movie to drink from or the ad campaigns. And what wound up happening, you probably know this, is because my content was consistent and because a lot of the brands, for example, and even distributors didn't have that cadence, didn't have that consistency in between delays, I became a little bit of a waypoint, So yeah. I don't know. I took that so seriously and decided I wasn't going to slow down at all.